Chispas.
Chispas. Are we in line? All right. Welcome to San Francisco CrossFit. I'm Kelly Starrett.
KellyPaoli.
And today we're going to talk about skill transfer exercises. CrossFit is ripe with lots and lots of movements, and a lot of movements that we tend to kind of take for granted. There's so much richness and so much kind of material to be mined out of what we think are basic movement positions. The dip, the push-up, the double under, the burpee.
Anything.
Anything. And so really what we want to talk about is show you how rich these positions are, and how that if we focus on body position, biomechanics, and some of these kind of more throwaway, simple body exercises, we can really lay a foundation and create an opportunity to make those things skill transfer exercises. And so suddenly the lowly push-up becomes a very important potentiator for creating external rotation torque in the shoulders, for creating better overhead positions, for example, etc. Right?
Totally.
Does that make sense?
So it totally makes sense. So I think the goal is to come from your side of physical therapy and really be able to use CrossFit as a diagnostics tool, and then come from my side where when we look at gymnastics at high level, be able to translate that kind of simplified movement into whatever it is our functional performances, and how we can actually connect those two and create some very simple cues and actions that any athlete or anyone that's trying to do these movements and getting into CrossFit or performing at really high levels can use and translate into max output, whatever that is, and so, for whoever it is.
I guess my problem with that is I don't want to be the stretching guy. I want to be the high-level elite gymnast guy. Now, seriously, one of the reasons we want to talk about this is that when we start to see athletes who develop large work capacities, we start to see athletes who are very strong and capable. What ends up happening is that when we start to see kind of mechanic breakdowns and faults at high load, high speed, high volume iterations, athletes start to develop kind of a speed wobble. And when we see positions that are magnified, that are fundamental breakdowns of basic positioning, then we tend to kind of load joints, load tissues kind of disproportionately. And I think that's why it's such an easy way to spot problems and then address them. And then, you know, what you'll show, of course, is that it's the same thing.
It's the same thing.
What is it called?
The same thing.
The position.
The position.
So we're going to talk about the position today, all right? So we've spent a lot of time addressing this concept of midline stabilization, about trying to pretend like we have a single joint, that's the hip joint, or maybe the shoulder joint, where we're integrated. We talk about keeping head in line with the spine and being able to brace out of a neutral position. So when we say neutral spine, what we're talking about is maintaining neutral hips and neutral rib cage. And the reason we need to focus so much on these positions is that when we get out of these positions, we see kind of things turn off, we see kind of breakdowns and compensations, and so that if we can cultivate better positioning, better organization of the athlete all the time, then when it gets hairy and heavy or scary, then we're in a better position.
Correct. And I think, and that's where the concept of getting into the speed wobbles comes in, that where whatever goes on from the hip to the head, if we can maintain it neutral in extension or flexion, or just neutral position, we can actually see the projection into everything else that happens outside. So if we're snatching, we're snatching. If there's some kind of deviation in that spinal position, we'll see it translate into whatever our overhead looks like or a squat looks like. And the same thing if we go towards the gymnastics side or the endurance side, where after long periods of time, you'll see a distortion, and that's your speed wobble in different terms. So if we can come in and talk about what we as gymnasts see as a hollow body position, or a very neutral position, and what you as a physical therapist address for a proper biomechanics standpoint, I think we can translate it very simple into the stuff that we see in CrossFit, which is really functional.
And really, it's about going faster. So
yes.
How do we get our athletes into a better position and allow them for better expression of power?
Correct.
Now, I feel like sometimes when we talk about neutral spine, we're saying rib cage is neutral, overstacked over neat pelvis. Correct. And I brace and I get tight in that position. I understand that, especially when I start to load and do things like this. Yep. But I think there's some confusion, because what we're certainly saying is that we need to be able to brace out of these positions and create these concepts of global flexion and global extension without breaking it a single segment. And I think that's the problem. So, you know, to carry this, we've had this conversation before, but when people are deadlifting, for example, I try to get tight, create an extension moment through the whole spine, and not create more than one hip joint, right? So I want to have lots of hip joints. That's one big hip joint. Make sense?
Right.
All right, so go ahead.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So I think the next step would be, hey, how can we take this and see how it affects shoulder positioning and what that looks like, just because I think that's a little taboo, what the shoulder does and what happens with the shoulder joint, especially because it has a little bit more mobility and some more stuff happening. And you know that way better than I do, but I think
that's true.
You do. He does.
So,
but yeah.
You know, and, yeah, absolutely. So I'll tell you, to tie this back in, what we want to do is show that it's difficult sometimes to see these loss of positions in basic Olympic lifting, high potential movements or complex movement, and then it's a lot easier to start to see it stripped down. And can I see the relationship between loss of position on the rings or position on a broken position on a push-up and you know, the other things that kind of become more complex? Because frankly, push-ups are awesome, but I love snatching.
Yes.
Right? Does that make sense?
Well, the goal is to take the very basic things that we do that are simple to see and understand, and then translate them into the fun stuff. And it's just like CrossFit is just a tool to make you better at what you do outside, or now it's become a sport, so you take other things that are outside to make you better at what you do inside.
Oh, I like
so it kind of goes both ways. TM. All right.
Okay, so
cool.
Let's start with kind of the most simple way to think about this, or way to express this neutral position, and that's straight up and down, right? And so what we want to do is start to show our athletes how everything is interaccommodating. That, you know, a kettlebell swing, a pull-up, a push-up are all chances for me to try to make my athletes break position, not lose that kind of internal rotation or internal tension, internal torque, and you know, see how all those forces are trying to put me into a low energy broken position.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely something that has to be addressed, because we say, hey, how do we cue this? And I think cueing is one of the biggest things for coaches. We give a skeleton, and hopefully the athlete or the person we're working with can rationalize it and translate it and coach themselves. But we've always had a hard time with cueing. What is it? Is it a rigid body position? Is it stiff? And I think that's where we can start getting into some fun stuff. So if we talk about this neutral position, first address it, then we can start talking about global extension and flexion and what that would be like in gymnastics, how we bow, and what it kind of translates into doing pull-ups and these kips, and then what it looks like when we start snatching, deadlifting, cleaning, all this fun stuff.
So let's start with a conversation about what is the position. The position we're saying is straight up and down, neatly organized, and a lot of our athletes cannot get into a good position.
Neutral anatomical position,
in fact, this is going to rhyme with Shavasana and yoga, but the rib cage is in and down, which is one of our cues, even in our level 1, and I'm able to externally rotate the shoulders. In fact, if you attend a Brian McKenzie or a CrossFit Endurance Running Cert, we talk about holding the chips. We're nice and tight, and we're straight up and down. And if we just start with the basic bounce for us, show us basic bounce, you'll notice that Carl has his rib cage in and down. He's actually squeezing his butt. And the reason we need to get a little bit of a butt squeeze out of him, or a recruitment of the back, is that he can't control all of the movement of the low back. Now go ahead and turn your butt off and jump. And you can see how soft he becomes instantaneously, where he starts to collapse and break. And don't even exaggerate that, just bounce.
No, I'm not exaggerating.
Oh, you're not exaggerating. It's just ugly. Go ahead and squeeze your butt again, whoop, and immediately we improve performance, improve position. So if this is straight up and down, is there something that maybe we cue all the time that rhymes with jump roping?
Sure.
Absolutely. So suddenly a jump rope, or even just pulling singles, is a powerful example of what is the position. And so the other day on the CrossFit main site, we saw positions where we're on the box and making sure that athletes are opening the hip up all the way. That either happen in the air or at the top of the box. What we're trying to do is what? Get into what we call
extension, but the position.
And the position. So one more time for us. Because we see a lot of athletes who can maintain this good position. He's straight up and down. He's got his butt on. He's nice and tight and integrated. And can you double under from that position? And what's happened there is suddenly this double under has become a very, very strong potentiator of this triple extension being neutral. And so what's happened is that we're asking a bigger jump from Carl, a bigger, tighter integration. Now, can you do a broken cobra? What's important about this is that I no longer have to view the double under as I can do it or not do it. But now every time he double unders, we're seeing an overextension moment in his back. And basically, what's happened is we've taken a skill that's either 1 or 0, I can do it, can't do it, and now I can do a million of them, and now we're saying, hey, let's go ahead and make that more sophisticated. Let's make that into a better triple extension position. Is that right?
Yeah.